Welcome into this special edition of Talking Tumors. A little bit different background today. Decided to go with nice Sanford Hall in the background. Going to be a shorter episode. I know we've been a little inconsistent with the schedule. I apologize. As many of you probably know, spring very busy. A lot going on for all of us, so I apologize for being a little inconsistent with the show. But again, I promise you we're going to get on a more regular schedule in the near future. But I wanted to get on here. I wanted to get some thoughts out on Auburn football spring practice. So it's going to be a shorter video, but I did want to offer up some thoughts on where Auburn spring practice is going right now, things to look out for in the future, as we are just about a week away now from A-Day, less than that, depending on when you're watching or listening to this episode. So it's coming in a hurry, and we'll have plenty more content past that. And we'll also dive into more on Auburn basketball on the show as well. But today, we're just going to focus on Auburn football and spring football and what is going on with this program. So let's not waste any more time. I know you've got things to do, so I want to make sure that this is worth your while and that you're not just we're not just wasting time here. So let's get into it. Takeaways from Alex Golesh and what he has said so far during spring practice, kind of takeaways from spring practice. Let's dive into that. First thing I want to dive into, how about the practices? I know the media doesn't get to see a ton, but I figured they were going to be different from a Hugh Freeze practice, and they are. They are very intense, faster. As you ask the players about them, certainly they're probably more worn out after them than they were under Hugh Freeze. And that's not to take a shot at Hugh Freeze. That's not to say his practices weren't hard, but I do think it's another level. The pace of them is certainly different. And that's intentional, especially offensively. When you talk about an offense that's going to be up tempo, you have to make practices that way. You have to practice the way you're going to play. Auburn's coaching staff is very intense. And that was the case defensively last year. I think that mindset is also on the offensive side of the football this year. So I think the practices have been different. I think they've been good. And I think the energy at practice has been better than it was in previous years. I think Xavier Atkins attested to that in an interview he had about a week or so ago. I think practices have been a positive for this program. And I assume that same structure will carry over into fall, as we're still, again, just in spring practices right now. But I assume that will carry over into the fall as well. An interesting thing that came up this week that I really wanted to dive into and share some thoughts on was the Iron Bowl period. So this caused a lot of controversy, I guess, on social media. Maybe not controversy, not a fair word. A lot of conversation, I guess, would be more fair this week for this Iron Bowl period. What do fans think about this? I don't give it. Let me rephrase this. I do not care what opposing fan bases have to say about that. That doesn't matter to me. But what does the Auburn fan base have to say about this? How does the Auburn fan base feel about this? From my perspective, hosting this show, I love it. I think it is outstanding. Alex Golesh got to speak on this Iron Bowl period yesterday in his interview on Friday, depending on when you're listening to this, in his press conference that he had. So let me tell you, you don't know what I'm talking about. You're like, what are you talking about? Iron Bowl period, Carson. You haven't read it yet or anything about it, haven't seen anything about it. So let me explain it to you. The Iron Bowl period is one period during practice that Auburn is having. I assume in every practice, at least in one of the practices that the media saw this week, it's supposed to be the most intense portion of practice. During it, when the media was there, Auburn was playing Dixieland Delight. Personally, I love that song. I hate that Alabama decides that they're going to claim it as theirs because it's a really good song. But nonetheless, that was a side note there. Blaring Dixieland Delight on the speakers. It's just a period to focus on the Iron Bowl and what that game means. But some people took it as, why are you doing that? You know, every game's got to be the same, so forth and so on. You got to treat every game the same. I get that. However, it is the Iron Bowl. It's not the same as any other game. It is more important than any other game on your schedule, and you should act like it. And Alex Golesh said on Friday in his press conference that when he's talked to boosters, when he's talked to fans, they told him, hey, we want to win, but we really want to win that last game of the regular season. And he understands that, and he said, so if it's important, then we need to emphasize it. And therefore, he is emphasizing it with a period. Now, just to give you some context on this isn't something new to Auburn. I still think Iron Bowl is the best rivalry in football and potentially in all of college sports. But Michigan and Ohio State, another great one. Michigan and Ohio State, at least Ohio State, I know, has a period for the Michigan game that they have in their practice. So this is not something that is unheard of. It is just new, as far as I know, for Auburn to do a period like this. But I love it, and I love what Alex Golesh said when, along with that, as he continued in his quote, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, "We can say that it's just like another game, and maybe that's the right thing for me as a coach to say. That's coach speak to treat it like any other game, but it's not." And I appreciated that honesty from Alex Golesh. And I think one thing that fans get wrong, that potentially coaches get wrong at times, is they say, "Well, treat every game the same." And in a way, that is true. But when you're playing in a national championship game, or you're playing in a rivalry game, it's not. And I think acting like it is just a dumb way to approach it. The key is making sure you're not doing more than needs to be done. So essentially, realizing you don't have to play any differently than you do in any other game. Still do the same things you've been doing, still execute at the same level. Don't try to do more than you can do. Play within yourself, essentially. That's the approach you should take in every single game. However, to ignore and act like one game's not bigger than the other, I don't agree with that strategy. Like, we've still got to do things the same way, but we can acknowledge that, hey, this game is bigger than some of the other games that we're playing. That's okay. You still have to play the same standard but you can still acknowledge that, hey, this is a bigger game. And I think that's what Alex Golesh was getting at there, and I 100% agree with it. So again, people can make fun of it, whatever. I don't care what other fan bases say. I think that Auburn fans like this. I think that the majority of Auburn fans appreciate this. I know some that especially live in the state of Georgia, are like, hey, let's do a period for the Deep South's oldest rivalry as well. I know for some Auburn fans that are from the state of Georgia, that game means more to them than the Iron Bowl. Being from Alabama, it's not the case for me, although I don't like Georgia either. Would love to see Auburn win that one as well. So I certainly hear that, and maybe Auburn will institute a practice period for that game too. But I did like this, and I thought what Alex Golesh said about this was spot on. If you haven't listened to the full quote, it's long because Alex Golesh never gives short answers. I would encourage you to go listen or read his full quote there. But that's kind of a summary of what it was. So that was something that stirred some controversy this week. Another thing that stirred some controversy. Now, I'm a little bit old to the news on this, but in case you missed it, a couple weeks ago, Byron Brown's throwing motion went viral on social media. He does have a long windup. You haven't seen him throw it, but that was about the dumbest thing ever. And social media is filled with dumb stuff. I get it. I understand it. I think some Auburn fans fell into the bait. It's clickbait. You don't know what that is. It means trying to get somebody to click on something because you get views, you get interactions. That's exactly what it was. But there is some truth to, okay, could his throwing motion cause some issues? Could it lead to some strip sacks? Sure, it could. He's not perfect. He's not a perfect quarterback. No one is. But am I concerned about his throwing motion? No, I'm not concerned about his throwing motion. What I'm concerned about is, can he win games? And can he make plays to win games? And Byron Brown can do that. He can make plays to win football games. Could his throwing motion put him in a tough spot at times? Sure. But overall, he's learned how to deal with it. He knows that he has a slower throwing motion. He knows how to speed up some throws at times. He's a veteran quarterback. He'll make the adjustments if he needs to. I am not concerned about Byron Brown's throwing motion in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think Auburn fans should be either. He can win football games for you. He can be a good quarterback for Auburn this season, and that's all that matters to me. I don't care how you throw the football. If you can win games, you can win games, and Byron Brown can do that. So I just wanted to offer a short thought here again. I'm just hitting some bullet points. I know we're not spending too much time on any one thing, just kind of bouncing here. But another thing that stood out to me throughout the spring from Alex Golesh was something he said about leadership. And I believe he said this last week. He had a quote on leadership, and it was in response to asking about leaders on this team. And he mentioned that he still wants better leadership from some of the guys. And he mentioned a few guys that he wanted to step up in as being leaders. But he said something I've never heard before. And that is, again, I'm paraphrasing here, that leadership, there is no leading by example. That's not a thing. He said that's just doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that struck me. I was never heard that before, because you often hear, hey, lead by example. That guy leads by example. He's not vocal, but hey, he leads by example. And Alex Golesh said that's not a thing. You can't be a leader if you're not vocal. And I was struck by that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Now, some people got upset about that. So that's not true. That's not true. And I think people are missing the point a little bit about what Alex Golesh was saying there. He's not saying that the actions don't matter and actions aren't a part of leadership. They absolutely are. But he's saying if you want actual leadership, you need actions and words. You can't just be actions. You certainly just can't be words. You need actions and words. And so essentially he's saying if anyone's just leading by example, they're just doing what they're supposed to. They're not actually leading. And I thought there was a lot of truth to that. And as the media has spoken to the players in the last couple of weeks, they've been asked, kind of about their leadership, and you can tell they're listening to Alex Golesh's message here. Like Anquan Fagans, for instance, this week he talked about how he's trying to get better as a vocal leader. That's something that doesn't come naturally to him necessarily, but it's something he's working on because he needs to be a leader for this team in this secondary. And so I like that a lot from Alex Golesh, and I thought there was a lot of truth to that. Sometimes, coaches try to overthink the room and come up with something new, and you may think that's just overthinking it, but I think there's a lot of validity to what he said, and I think it matters. It matters a whole lot because if you can have actions and then you have words to back it up, I think guys are going to be a lot more motivated to follow you as leaders than they are if you're just going out there and just doing what you're supposed to do. Guys probably aren't going to notice that and pick up on that and follow you as much. So essentially, Alex Golesh said, just leadership by example, just doing what you're supposed to. So that's not actually leadership, to summarize. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Overall takeaways from Alex Golesh so far based on his media availability and based on what we know coming from the little bit of windows that the media has got to see of practice. I think Alex Golesh is pleased with where his team's at. He doesn't seem to be panicking about anything at the moment or overly concerned about anything. Now, maybe he could be hiding it very well, and you don't want to give your opponents anything in spring that they can key in on. But he overall seems fairly pleased. I think he wants more leadership from this team, as he said from the day he got this Auburn job, that the best teams are going to be player-led. Any coach will tell you that, and it absolutely is true. So I do think that is one thing he's harping on and emphasizing. And development. He knows that there's no spring portal window. So this is your team that you have now. So he's harping on, hey, we got to make the most of it. We may be deficient in some areas, and I do think that is true. We'll get into that in just a second. But we got to make the most of it, and we got to get the best out of the team. I think that's his philosophy. I think he's pleased with the defense, and I'm not surprised by that. The defense should be ahead of the offense. It's not a new system with DJ Durkin being retained. You retained a good number of players on the defensive side of the ball. And so it's no surprise that the defense is ahead of the offense at this point. I think the first scrimmage, that kind of showed from what we got out of that. Now, Alex Golesh, I don't think he said that the defense won, but I think the defense won that first scrimmage. I'm not panicking about that. Defenses usually win throughout camp. Now, you want to see the offense getting better, and you want to see by A-Day next week maybe the offense having a little bit more success. But I'm not surprised. The defense knows the offense, and the offense is still installing a new system. So I'm not overly concerned about that, but I do think the defense is having a really good spring camp. But I think overall there have been a lot of positives. So let's get into players. Let's talk about a few standout players from spring, and then we will close with concerns. So we'll close on a happy note here, but let's start out with some players that are standing out. Xavier Atkins. Xavier Atkins was one of the biggest retention pieces for Auburn this offseason. Star linebacker, transferred from LSU last season, became a star for Auburn in this DJ Durkin defense. Auburn retained him. He is a vocal leader. He is one of the best leaders on this team, and love that he's having a big spring camp. And even now, as Golesh said, hey, we had to remind Xavier Atkins, like, hey, the guys in the orange jerseys, meaning the non-contact jerseys, that means you don't need to touch them. You don't need to hit them. You rather have to dial a guy back than try to fire him up. So I love that from Xavier Atkins. He's really standing out. Another one on the defensive side is Cody Sigler. That was a transfer defensive lineman from Arkansas State, originally from the state of Alabama. A wonderful story from Division II to Arkansas State and now to Auburn. He's going to be a key piece on this Auburn defensive line. He's got position flexibility, meaning he can move around for multiple different positions along the defensive line. Auburn's counting on him being a key piece to the defense, so it's good that he is standing out and having a really good camp so far. Another guy, Ty Buster. So Ty Buster, if you don't know who he is a redshirt freshman offensive lineman for Auburn. He was in last year's signing class. Right now, he's getting starting reps at left tackle. So Stanton Ramil is out, transferred from Michigan State. He's expected to start at one of the tackle positions. However, he's recovering from an off-season surgery, so he's not doing much in spring. So he's out. So Ty Buster is playing and starting at tackle right now for Auburn, and is having a really, really good camp. He was someone, so Auburn only retained 3 offensive linemen. Ty Buster is one of them. So if you only retain a couple guys, It tells you those three guys that Auburn retained, they felt good about, and they felt like these guys have potential. Ty Buster's one of them. I don't know that he'll start at tackle with Stanton Ramil and Joseph Simmons. I do think he's going to have a solid chance to start somewhere, whether that is at guard or at tackle. Auburn just has to figure out the best five men that it can get on the field for that offensive line. That won't be decided until fall camp. But Ty Buster's going to play this year. I do feel confident in that, and it is really good to see him have a good camp. I still believe offensive line is a developmental position. And so having a guy that's been at Auburn and then being able to develop him is really massive. Look, you have to get offensive linemen out of the transfer portal, but you would hope eventually you get to the point where you don't have to do that very much. You may supplement one or two guys, but you hope you get to the point where you're getting guys in through high school and then you're developing them along the offensive line. Hopefully Ty Buster's the start of that for Auburn. We know this has been a challenge for Auburn for quite a while now, the offensive line. I'll talk more about that in just a second. But Ty Buster having a good camp. Another offensive player, Deshaun Spencer. He is a freshman wide receiver, early enrollee. He was committed to Duke for a while. The previous staff really didn't push him. He didn't fit necessarily what Hugh Freeze typically look for at the wide receiver position. But the new staff got in and said, hey, no, this guy can work in our offense. And Alex Golesh went after him, flipped him from Duke. Auburn lands him, and he's having a great camp to the point where Alex Golesh said on Friday that, hey, we're going to have to get Deshaun Spencer some reps with the ones. That's how well he is playing. So if he's getting reps with the ones in the spring, I think you have to feel good about his chances to play and play an important role for Auburn offensively this season. So I'm happy for him, a receiver out of Saraland, Alabama. So really good to see from Deshaun Spencer. Another Deshaun, this time on the defensive side of the ball, is transfer defensive end Deshaun Womack from Ole Miss. Auburn needs somebody to step up in this defensive end edge room because Auburn lost a lot. And that's one of my biggest position rooms of concern this upcoming season. And Womack came from Ole Miss, was a solid player there, but not a star. Auburn needs him to be a big piece for the defense if it wants to reach its full potential this season. And it sounds like so far he's having a really good spring camp, and that is good to hear for Auburn. Another note along in the edge defensive end room, Auburn did get a boost. Chris Murray, who transferred from Sam Houston State last year, he only played 1 year for Auburn, thought he might be out of eligibility. Auburn appealed it to the NCAA. He was granted another year of eligibility. So he's going to be back with the team. Alex Golesh said on Friday that he's working his way back. He obviously had not been able to practice with the team yet. So he's got to get back in shape. But that's a big, important addition. This adds more depth to the room. Chris Murray's not a great player, no offense, but he's a solid player. He'll provide depth there. He will get snaps, I would imagine. And you can never have too much depth in college football, especially in the edge and defensive end rooms. So that was a big addition for Auburn. As far as concerns go so far from me, nothing major sticking out, but until we get to the season, offensive line is going to be a concern for me. I think Auburn did a solid job in the transfer portal along the offensive line, but I don't know if it's going to be good enough. I think on paper, the talent in the offensive line room is not as talented as last year's offensive line. However, similar to how I feel about some other position rooms on this team, I do think Auburn could be better. Again, keyword being could be better along the offensive line than they were last season just because of the scheme and development and coaching that I think this offensive line will get. But I am concerned about it, especially some of what we've heard out of the first scrimmage from the way the defense is played. So offensive line is something that I will certainly be watching over this last week of spring practice and then, of course, into fall camp. But we'll have much more, just kind of a bigger recap of spring practice after A-Day next weekend. So A-Day is going to be next Saturday. After that concludes, we'll have a much deeper dive into spring, kind of takeaways as you head into the summer and get ready for the season coming in the fall. It'll be here before we know it. But I did want to get some thoughts out on Auburn football and how spring practice was going. Again, thank you for watching. I really, really appreciate it again. Like I said, we'll get back to a more normal routine here in the coming month or so as things start to settle down a little bit. As spring obviously is a very busy time, but I really do appreciate you watching. If you haven't already, I just ask you would like and subscribe to the show. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Talkin' Tumors. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe and follow @Talkin' Tumors on social media so you'll never miss an episode. War Eagle.